Okay, so we are going to jump into 1.7 notes, which are the all about the hydrologic cycle. You guys probably know it more commonly called the water cycle. So let's go ahead and get started here. So the water cycle is, I'm sure you're familiar with this cycle, probably more so than all the other cycles, but it's the movement of water in different states between both sources and sinks. And so the state of matter that we find water moving is either solid, liquid, or gas. And then the other important thing to know is where the water is actually moving, because that is kind of key to understand the different parts of the water cycle. So, for instance, for precipitation, it starts off in the atmosphere as a gas, and then as it becomes liquid, gravity pulls it down to the Earth's surface. And so, understanding sort of what form of matter or what state of matter the water is found will actually kind of tell you like what exactly is going, or where in the process or where in the cycle the water actually is. Okay, so the energy that drives the water cycle, it comes from the sun, which is where all the energy from our entire Earth originates. Starts with the sun. And the heat from the sun actually causes liquid water in bodies of water, whether that be oceans or lakes or rivers, to heat up to the point that it evaporates, turns into a gas, and then returns to the atmosphere. And that's what drives this cycle of water moving from liquid form to gas form back to liquid form. Okay, the ocean for water is the largest reservoir. And obviously we have, lots of other reservoirs as well. That includes ice caps or glaciers, ice caps on mountains, glaciers in the ocean, or groundwater, water that we find under the ground. And I think it's important to note that, and I'm going to get rid of my picture here because I'm kind of blocking some things. I think it's important to note that these ice caps and groundwater both contain fresh water, which is the usable form of water that we need as humans. And there's a very limited amount of fresh water on the planet. Once it's gone, it's gone. Okay, so continuing on here, we see that there are two main sources of water, and these are processes that cycle it back from liquid on Earth back into the atmosphere. So sometimes they're called vaporization, since the liquid actually becomes water vapor, and we just tend to call water vapor gas. But there's two ways that this happens. And so the first is transpiration. This is the process that plants actually use to pull groundwater or to draw groundwater from their roots up into their leaves. And this is all based on pressure within the plant.
11 a.m.
This all is based on pressure within the plant that causes that water to actually be pulled up. The leaf openings are called stomata, and you can see those right here on this diagram. This is where water is they'll open up those stomata, and the water actually evaporates through those openings on the underside of the leaf. Plants like cacti will keep their stomata closed, or plants that are in more dry environments will keep those stomata closed so that the water vapor cannot escape and it stays within the plant. We want to keep as much water in those drier climates in the plant as possible, because they have to be able to go for long periods of time without getting replenished with water. So that's just an adaptation that plants in dry environments have developed. The movement of water out of the leaf actually creates low water potential in the leaf. So again, there's that pressure. There's no water in the leaf. It allows that movement of water then up the stem. Okay, the second way that water moves from a liquid form back into the atmosphere is through something called evapotranspiration. And this is the amount of water that enters the atmosphere from both transpiration from plants and evaporation combined. Okay, so both processes, again, are driven by energy from the sun. So that's really important to note. And let's go ahead and move on here. There are three things that happen when water returns back to the earth. So we all know, we've learned since we were in kindergarten probably, or maybe even preschool, that water returns to the ground through precipitation. And that precipitation can either be in liquid form or solid or crystal form in the form of ice or snow. So runoff occurs, and there's three ways. Oh, I'm kind of missing some things here. Oh, the three things that happen when water returns. So once precipitation occurs and it hits the ground, there's a couple of different things that can happen to help move that water along. So the first is that runoff occurs when the ground is impermeable. So let's say that water hits a mountain and it's not going to go back down into the soil. So what it does is it actually goes through something that we call surface runoff or runoff. And when it hits an impermeable surface, like even a parking lot, it actually will run off of that surface until it hits either liquid water in the form of streams, or if it hits the ground, the soil, where it can actually then be absorbed. Runoff actually recharges surface waters, but it can also carry pollutants into water sources. And we'll talk about that a lot more later when we get to Unit 7, I believe. Okay, so another process is called percolation or infiltration. This occurs when water is absorbed by the ground. So if precipitation is falling and it hits a permeable surface, then that water will pass through that surface, and this process, percolation, actually recharges groundwater. And then groundwater, it's important to note again that groundwater and surface waters are important freshwater reservoirs for both humans and animals. And then the third thing that happens when water returns to the surface is that uptake occurs. And this is when those plants use that water for photosynthesis. Okay, so there are some human impacts on the watering cycle that are important to note, and I apologize that my slides aren't popping up correctly. But the first is that there's many ways that humans can impact this cycle. The first is by building structures to divert water, much like we have this dam over here. We'll learn a little bit more about how we use dam for hydroelectricity later on in Unit 6. But we can build structures to divert water, whether we're trying to create a reservoir like we have at Geist. And so we'll create a dam that stops the water from moving as quickly. Or we might create pipes so that we're moving water, or levees to hold water back. So there's different things that we can build to actually change the flow of water, the natural flow of water. The second thing that we do, that humans do, is we actually either cut down trees through deforestation, or there's some other type of habitat destruction. For instance, maybe we're building homes, and so we destroy some wetlands. And this can actually remove plants from this from their native or natural habitat. And this actually changes then what is happening with the water. So instead of the plants actually using some of that water through uptake, now it's going to be moved, or it's just going to change the process. The water cycle is going to change. And then lastly, water pollution and human-caused climate change can actually deplete the amount of limited fresh water that we have. So if we pollute water badly enough, there comes a point where we can't filter it anymore, or it's so expensive to filter it that it's not really a feasible way to get fresh water anymore. So water pollution and then human-caused climate change, like we say, can actually deplete the limited freshwater supply. Okay, and then if not maintained properly, both erosion and heat waves can alter the hydrologic cycle, and this can cause harm to both humans and natural ecosystems. So when I think of this, I think of areas that are becoming warmer, and therefore either they're not going to get the weather or the rain that they normally get, or they're just going to become more dry because evaporation is going to happen more readily. And then organisms that need more water to survive are not going to be able to survive in those areas. Okay. So here is our practice FRQ for 1.7. It says to choose a process from the diagram and identify the process and describe how water is moving from one reservoir to another. Okay, I'll see you next time. Next time we're going to be working on 1.8. Have a good day, everyone.